Yes, no, maybe. I don't know. Can you repeat the question? You're not the boss of me now. You're not the boss of me now. You're not the boss of me now, and you're not so big. You're not the boss of me now. You're not the boss of me now. You're not the boss of me now, and you're not so big. Life is unfair.
Hey everybody, Alex the Critic here, and it's once again time to rip apart a stupid video that I found on the internet. This is Cancerous Commentaries. Today, we're going to do something a little different from the norm. Instead of responding to a video point by point, what we're gonna do is review a debate. That's right. My idiot self decided that it would be a good idea to try and provide insightful, thought-provoking commentary on a debate. So, which debate will we be reviewing? God help us, let's get into that. The subject of today's commentary was hosted by a national debate organization named Modern Day Debates, which was streamed to their associated YouTube channel on November 4th, 2023. The subject of the debate, as the title of the video suggests, is about which worldview provides a better ethical foundation for a civilized society, secular humanism or Christianity. Unlike a lot of the other debates hosted by MDD, this debate was part of a special live conference that the organization hosted, meaning that if you wanted to spend money to see the debate in person and ask the debaters questions, you could. Keep that in mind, because this information plays a huge role in my perception of this debate. Anyways, representing the side of secular humanism is Matt Dillahunty, a progressive atheist who's perhaps best known as one of the hosts of the Atheist Experience, a long-running radio-turned-internet talk show that hosts debates about religion. Representing the side of Christianity is Andrew Wilson, a Christian conservative debater who owns his own debate organization named The Crucible. At the time of this debate, Matt Dillahunty was widely heralded as one of the most formidable defenders of atheism in the debate sphere. Andrew Wilson, on the other hand, was a relative newcomer to the scene who few people had ever heard of. He'd had a few standout debates with various left-wing streamers before this point, but nobody was expecting him to send Matt packing. When this debate was finished, however, the public perception of these two was flipped on its head. Matt Dillahunty came out looking like an absolute joke, while Andrew Wilson established a name for himself as a hard-hitting rhetorician. Now, as this is a debate review and not a piecemeal response video, I am only going to examine what was argued, not how persuasive the arguments were. So if you're expecting me to sit here and go off on minutes-long rants about how stupid either ideology is, you're going to be disappointed. However, for the sake of being transparent, I will admit that despite being a deist, I subscribe to Christian ethics. If you have no idea what a deist is, it's somebody who believes that a god exists, but doesn't subscribe to any singular organized religion. I am also a big fan of Andrew Wilson, whom I discovered through this debate. I am also a social conservative who opposes many of the things that Matt Dillahunty defended in this debate. Once again, however, we are not here to discuss how persuasive Matt's arguments are. We are only going to talk about what he said and how he conducted himself. With that said, let's get on to the debate. The debate begins with Matt being given the opportunity to deliver the first opening statement. He opens by laying out what he sees as the core disagreement between secular humanists and Christians, which is that the former is only interested in the, quote, betterment of humanity, unquote, while the latter adheres to a rigid belief system that purportedly prescribes the death penalty to behaviors that a secular humanist sees as mundane or harmless. Worse still, in Matt's opinion, the God that gave Christians the ethical system that they model their whole lives around is an abusive, stupid, and psychopathic tyrant who sees his subjects as utterly contemptible ants.
Humanism has as its focus the betterment of humanity in this life, while Christianity has as its focus adherence to a God and the disposition of souls in an afterlife. Our best efforts in this life are, according to the Bible, like filthy rag. Our best attempts at righteousness and justice are portrayed as vile and disgusting when compared to a bumbling God constantly failing to get his creation to love and respect him, while also prescribing the death penalty for nearly everything: adultery, blasphemy, breaking the Sabbath, disobedient children, witchcraft, worshiping another God, not being a virgin on your wedding night.
He then argues that the best worldview to adopt would be one that focuses more on bettering the lives of people and less on killing people that reject all or even part of said worldview.
Which is better for society? Well, I'd say the one that has human society as its focus and isn't so intent on killing humans for not buying into a specific doctrine.
So far, Matt is actually doing a decent job of remaining calm and composed. The moral standards and terminology he's appealing to are vague as hell, but at least he's acting like an adult. You might be wondering why, then, his conduct in this debate reflected poorly on his character. Just keep watching. It'll all make sense soon. Matt argues that heaven and hell, which Christians believe are the respective destinations of good and bad people once they pass on, aren't human societies, as he puts it, meaning that they cannot be accurate markers for how one ought to live their lives, as what God thinks is unknowable, which therefore makes God's thoughts irrelevant to any ethical system one is trying to argue for.
Heaven and hell, if they were to exist, aren't human societies. What a God thinks is unknown and irrelevant.
He then contests that there's never been a nation whose laws reflected the beliefs of secular humanists, nor has there been a society whose majority believes in secular humanism. As such, when determining how much better of an ethical system it has over Christianity, one must compare and contrast the values that each system upholds.
There's never been a secular humanist nation, either in a governmental form, which I'm not advocating for, or in a primary philosophical view of the majority of the population, which means we have to look at the ideals between these two positions.
Matt then gives a brief summation of the history of secular humanism as an ideology, tracing its roots to a manifesto published in 1933 which, interestingly enough, described it as a religion. The manifesto then went through several different updates and iterations, refining the core ethos of secular humanism into the one that Matt is defending today. He also explains that there are several organizations who practice and preach secular humanism.
Secular humanism has been around for 90 years. In 1933, the first Secular Humanist Manifesto was published. It identified humanism as a religion with 15 points. It was updated 40 years later in 1973 with a lot more information. And then it was incredibly shortened in 2003. In addition to the manifestos, there are organizations like the Council for Secular Humanism, American Humanists, etc.
According to Matt, the first of these values is that there's no supernatural foundation for determining a human being's moral worth, and that instead, a society should be governed and maintained by people who voluntarily work amongst themselves in pragmatic fashion to keep society functioning in such a manner that maximizes human happiness.
In the first version of the manifesto, it's presented as a religious view where it acknowledges there's no supernatural guarantee of human value. We advocate a heightened sense of personal life and a cooperative effort to promote social well-being. The goal of humanism is a free and universal society in which people voluntarily and intelligently cooperate for the common good.
No, I have no idea what any of that actually means from a practical standpoint. But again, we are not here to pick apart the logic of Matt's worldview, only what tactics he uses.
Matt then explains that the updated version of the manifesto introduced more nuance to this core value, which is that secular humanism doesn't provide any moral or ethical ought claims, and is instead a loose-knit collection of beliefs that are used in tandem to try and guide society in a positive direction.
In the manifesto version 2, 40 years later, this includes a lot more information. Short versions, they begin by saying those who sign this disclaim that they are setting forth a binding credo. This statement reaches for a vision in time that needs direction. We affirm a set of common principles that can serve as a basis for united action. This isn't a to-do list or a thou shalt not list.
He further explains that secular humanists are not entirely opposed to the influence of religious ethical codes, but stand against dogmatic, authoritarian views that, quote, place anything above human needs, unquote.
We're fine with religion's inspiration, but we're opposed to dogma and authoritarian views that place anything above human needs.
Next, Matt argues that there's no such evidence for God's existence, and that the promise of eternal salvation and damnation are similarly illusory and thus harmful. This means that moral values are derived solely from human experience and human needs.
Religions don't pass the test of scientific evidence. The promises of immortal salvation or eternal damnation are illusory and harmful. Ethics and moral values stem from human experience, and situational ethics stem from the human need and human interest.
Now, here's the first note to keep in mind. One of Matt's objections to Christian ethics is that there's no evidence for the existence of a God. This contention is directly addressed by Andrew in a rather unique way when he gives his opening statement, only for Matt to dismiss his rebuttal for the flimsiest reason ever. But we'll get to that soon.
Matt then explains that while secular humanists believe reason and intelligence are the most effective instruments that humans possess, they do not believe that such instruments should be used without consideration for human emotions. He then reiterates that human lives have intrinsic, equal value, and that said value is affirmed by secular humanism. He explains that this purportedly empirical affirmation of the value of human life is, quote, more powerful, unquote, than the same position being affirmed by a god who hasn't been proven to exist.
Reason and intelligence are the most effective instruments we possess. We are not advocating for the use of scientific intelligence independent of or in opposition to emotion, for we believe in the cultivation of feeling and love. Individuals are precious and their dignity is affirmed. This is important. Us, human being, affirming the value of individuals and human beings is more powerful than a God affirming it, and it's infinitely more powerful than a human claiming a God affirms this, which is all we appear to have.
God, it's taking everything in my power to not go on a 5-minute rant about how shallow and nonsensical that argument sounds.
Matt then gives his shortened summary of the third and final revision of this value, which is that one should not base their assessment of reality on a supernatural being who hasn't been shown to exist, but rather on reason and science, and that our solution to society's ills should also be reached through reason and science. He further explains that justice, fairness, equality, and autonomy are the primary qualities that secular humanists wish to improve, not an unproven afterlife.
The third version of the manifesto, in a nutshell, because it's so short, whether God exists or not, we have problems to solve. We have to do this without appeals to the supernatural entities or intervention. We must utilize the best methods at our disposal. Reason and science seem to be the primary ones to assess reality and reach conclusions. Justice, fairness, equality, and autonomy are the primary goals This life, not a hypothetical afterlife, is what we're trying to improve.
Matt then asks what happens when religions take charge of societies, and first points out that such governments will refuse to work out reasonable diplomatic compromises over territorial disputes, using the Israel-Palestine conflict as his prime example.
So what happens when religions control societies and governments, either legitimate or illegitimate? Well, conflicts with other societies and other governments may not have any reasoned diplomatic solution. Need only look to Gaza.
He then remembers that he's supposed to be focusing on Christianity, and clarifies that under secular humanism, one can still hold a variety of different social and political beliefs. The only restraint is that one cannot impose that belief on others through the use of government doctrine.
But that's Islam and Judaism. Here we have Christianity as a primary and Christian nationalism. Under secular humanism, you get to be a Christian, a Jew, a Muslim, gay, straight, socialist, capitalist. You just don't get to impose those necessarily on others through acts of fiat.
Okay, I'll address this point just because its stupidity bugs me. If secular humanism is opposed to the use of force to propagate itself, then how exactly are you going to convince anyone to stay subscribed to it? Like it or not, all worldviews are backed by the threat of violence, so if you're not willing to use that to enforce your beliefs, then what's stopping some religious nutjob from hijacking your institutions and using them to enforce their beliefs? Lastly, how the hell can you argue that secular humanism puts forth no ought claims if one of the core tenets of your ideology is that one should not use government intervention to force their beliefs onto others, which is in and of itself an ought claim?
Stupid! You're so stupid!
Alright, let's get back to the debate.
By contrast, Matt argues, religious governments do not allow people to hold whatever views they want or practice whatever lifestyles they so choose. The example he uses to back up his point is Mike Johnson, a social conservative who currently serves as the Speaker of the United States House of Representatives. The actions that Johnson, an evangelical Southern Baptist, takes as a lawmaker are heavily influenced by his religious views, and he has a wide array of beliefs that Matt takes umbrage with, which I'll let him lay out for you.
Not necessarily true with the religions in charge of the government. Mike Johnson's the new Speaker of the House of the United States. He's homophobic as all get out. He's argued to criminalize homosexuality. Homosexualities, by the way, are U.S. citizens with specific rights that he wants to take away. Moreover, he advocates for gay conversion therapy, which is unscientific and torturous, because he thinks he can help them pray the gay away, and the gay can be eliminated. He's not anti-gay. He just wants them to cease to exist as gay. They get to keep being human beings. He thinks there's no right to sodomy. Privacy laws don't protect everything, and he thinks that what sort of sex you have it should be his to regulate. Sodomy, by the way, is anal or oral copulation, which I have it on good authority, heterosexual folks engage in as well. 2022, he presented what was called the Don't Say Gay bill, outlawing any discussion of gender identity, sexual orientation, or related subjects, which was incredibly problematic because he ignored what the experts have to say about age-appropriate content and how critical it is, especially for kids under 10, which was his target, to have correct language in order to better report on and about sexual abuse. His policy, if it had been implemented, would have made it more traumatic for kids and more difficult for them to out their abusers and easier for abusers to get away with it. Happily, it failed. In 2015, he blamed abortions and the breakup of the nuclear family for school shootings. He also says the teaching of evolution is to blame for mass shootings because we've taught a whole generation, couple generations now, of Americans that there's no right or wrong, that it's about survival of the fittest. And if you evolve from a primordial slime, what is that life of any sacred value? He wants student-led prayer back in school. So, Speaker, are you okay with Islamic prayers, satanic prayers, or just particular Christian prayers? He's opposed to the separation of religion and government, sometimes called the separation of church and state. He thinks that the founders only wanted to protect the church from the state and didn't want to protect the state from the church, citing the notorious lying pseudo-historian David Barton to support this view. He definitely seeks to impose his views on others.
So, there's two important things to keep in mind about this whole spiel, because they are the most damning to Matt's conduct in this debate. Firstly, he describes all Christians as deluded torturers of innocent people.
Moreover, he advocates for gay conversion therapy, which is unscientific and torturous.
Whether or not you agree with that, it is nevertheless very antagonistic language. Secondly, in an argument that's supposed to detail how secular humanism provides a better ethical framework for a society than Christianity does, Matt uses a singular person as the representative of all Christian beliefs and morals, instead of, the holy book that Christians derive said beliefs and morals from. Now, Matt himself argues that this is because he's trying to prove a different point about how oppressive, and therefore worse, religious societies are.
Under secular humanism, you get to be a Christian, a Jew, a Muslim, gay, straight, socialist, capitalist. You just don't get to impose those necessarily on others through acts of fiat. Not necessarily true with the religions in charge of the government.
But as we're about to see, that excuse doesn't prevent him from being a raging hypocrite for exercising this tactic. How so, you ask? Well, let's wrap up Matt's opening statement so that I can get on to my reasoning.
After Matt points out that not all Christians necessarily hold to the same set of beliefs, he then asks Andrew what his type of Christianity entails, and how it's better than Mike Johnson's version of Christianity. He then asks how Andrew plans to spread his version of Christianity to the masses, which seems hypocritical given that he's yet to provide his own answer to that question when it comes to his worldview, but I digress. As Johnson and countless other different denominations of Christianity all believe that their interpretation of their holy text is the correct one, and in fact, Johnson currently holds more power over society than Andrew does.
Now, some of you are saying, hang on, he's the Speaker of the House, he's not the Speaker of Christianity, or that's not my type of Christianity. Great. But what is your type? What's your type of Christianity like? Because there's a lot of them. How is it better? And how can we make sure that we get your better version than the one that Mike Johnson wants? He thinks his version's correct. So do you. Countless denominations without consensus. He's already got more power than my opponent has right now.
Matt then makes the most damaging admission of his entire opening statement.
So I don't know Andrew at all. I don't know what version of Christianity he's advocating for. I didn't bother to look him up. We literally just met and said hello as I sat down here.
Again, you're probably confused as to why that admission hurts Matt's case so badly, but it will all make sense later on in the video, I promise you. Just keep it stored in your mind until then.
Matt points out that all Christians base their ethical structures on the same book, which preaches about the same God, and that liberal and moderate Christians who share some or most of those beliefs provide legitimacy and cover for the more far-right adherents of their faith, who then advocate for Christian nationalism. He reminds us that secular humanism allows people to be Christians. It just doesn't allow those Christians to impose their religion on others.
Is his version of Christianity better? I really hope so, because it'd be hard to get a whole lot worse. But they point to the same book. They point to the same Savior, the same history. Liberal and moderate Christians provide legitimacy and cover to hide the fundamentalists and to allow them to engage in Christian nationalism. Secular humanism allows you to be a Christian right up until you try to oppose it on others, and then you get to keep being a Christian. You just don't get to practice it in the way where you're imposing it on others. You can pray, you can go to church, you can tithe, you can worship, gather, share, discuss, convert, vote based on your values, You can vote against your own best interest. I see people doing all the time. You can teach your kids your values under secular humanism.
But I thought the whole point of secular humanism was that one shouldn't impose their dogmatic religious beliefs onto others.
Under secular humanism, you get to be a Christian, a Jew, a Muslim, gay, straight, socialist, capitalist. You just don't get to impose those necessarily on others through acts of fiat.
Now you're saying that secular humanists can?
You can pray, you can go to church, you can tithe, you can worship, gather, share, discuss, convert, vote based on your values. You can vote against your own best interest.
You know what? I've already critiqued Matt's arguments more than I should have, so let's just move on.
Matt reiterates that secular humanism solves societal conflicts with science and reasoned debate, not through coercion or violence. He then argues that no adherent of secular humanism has ever required someone to believe something that cannot be proven, that no secular humanist has ordered the execution of their opponents, nor ordered the destruction of their opponents' property, that no secular humanist has used terrorism to overthrow or influence the actions of a government, and that no secular humanist has ever denied somebody's right to expression, as those actions go against the core values of the ideology, which, as mentioned before, involves using science, reason, and debate to improve justice, fairness, equality, and autonomy.
The foundational principles of secular humanism solve conflicts with data, debate, and discussion instead of coercion, conversion, or conquest. There is no secular humanist sect and no denomination of secular humanists that's ever required someone to believe something that is not empirically verifiable, that's ever ordered the death of another person, that's ever ordered or acted to act or destroy property of any person or government, that has ever overthrown a democracy to impose a secular humanist regime, that's ever been connected with terrorist cells and activities, that's ever denied freedom of speech or expression, that's ever called for the deaths of people for criticizing secular humanism or any religious view, that has ever advocated for or inspired suicide bombers or terrorist attacks. Those things are simply not consistent in any way with the core values of secular humanism.
Matt then insists that secular humanism offers no real threat to the existence of the belief structures of various religions, joking that such threats will instead come from atheists who will contest that such beliefs are not empirically demonstrable. He then repeats what the core foundations of secular humanism are, and that his ideology makes no moral claims, as they recognize that almost every belief structure that puts forth such claims fails when subjected to enough scrutiny as we learn more about our reality.
There is no threat to Christians, Jews, Muslims, Scientologists from secular humanism. There might be from scientific skepticism and rationality if you're not able to actually demonstrate the truth of your claim. But life, freedom, and an equitable relationship are the foundation of secular humanism. There is no list of thou shalt not or thou shalts, because we recognize that nearly every attempt at such a list fails at some point as we learn more about our world and about getting better at understanding the world better, about doing better, and being better in this life.
Matt ends his opening argument by giving the mission statement of secular humanism and asking Andrew what his objection and/or alternative solution is.
The goal of humanism is a free and universal society in which people voluntarily and intelligently cooperate for the common good. If you have an objection to that, or a better goal, what is it?
Whoo boy, that was a lot of nonsense I had to sit through. For the millionth time, I am not going to explain why all of Matt's arguments are nonsense, because that's not what this video is about. Instead, I'm going to move on to Andrew's opening statement, so that we can compare and contrast what each of these men said and did en route to me explaining why Matt's behavior was unjustified and self-defeating.
Andrew starts his opening statement by arguing that the debate could unfold in a number of different ways. For one, Matt has allegedly conceded in a prior debate with another conservative Christian debater named Jay Dyer that he has no grounding for any moral or meta-ethical presuppositions he may have, and that he just grants himself access to immaterial concepts that cannot be empirically proven, like logic and reason.
There's a few ways this debate could go. The topic is Christian ethics versus secular humanism. Which has a better foundation? The funny thing is, I already won that topic because, as Matt explained to Jay Dyer, he has no justification under the skeptical belief structure to give an accounting for any meta-ethical presupposition he may have. He just kind of grants himself stuff. He grants himself logic, he grants himself reason, he grants himself an entire worldview, even though he's using an unjustified starting position for it.
In simple terms, this means that if Matt says people should or should not do X, secular humanism provides him with no real answer as to why people should or shouldn't do X. As a consequence, Matt's worldview relies on the same kind of blind faith that the Christian worldview does. Andrew then, in an interesting turn of events, reveals that he doesn't wish to contest Matt's claim that God doesn't exist, as he feels that's a boring discussion to have for the reasons he just got done laying out. Instead, Andrew takes a rather unique approach to addressing Matt's contention by conceding that the Christian God doesn't exist, and granting Matt the assumption that his worldview is correct from an empirical standpoint.
So, I'm not honestly all that interested in doing the God not real dough debate, because one, it's boring, and two, it's also really boring. It goes like this. I don't see enough evidence and remain unconvinced there's a God. Then I say, but you use a theistic worldview of justification like there is a God to grant yourself logic and everything else. So instead of that, I'm just going to grant Matt's entire worldview. 2/3 or more of this entire planet are all operating inside of a shared delusion that they were created by a sky daddy who loves him some slavery and murderousness. He thinks it's funny to kind of cosmically with people. That's his deal, kind of his whole thing. That's Matt's worldview.
That sounds like a huge mistake, but you've gotta let my boy cook.
Andrew explains that if Christianity is no more than a delusional, psychotic Stone Age fantasy designed to turn people into murderous savages, then the question we should be asking is, should a society interested in remaining healthy and prosperous still be governed by such a backwards ideology? Andrew's answer is yes, because Christian ethics are still far and away better than whatever pseudo-intellectual nonsense Matt can propose.
So now Matt's right, and the question becomes, should we let them to continue to believe in this nonsensical Stone Age madness, or do we stop them from engaging in it? My contention is, even if God isn't real at all, that people acting as though he is still superior to whatever nonsensical egalitarian worldview Matt can come up with.
Andrew then reiterates that none of the immaterial concepts Matt appeals to when justifying his beliefs are, in fact, real, before attacking Matt's standards for how he judges the well-being of a society as being far too vague a metric to measure anything by.
See, Matt also just acts as though the things he believes are true. He believes, and therefore acts as though logic is real, math is real, everything is real based on his presuppositional belief that they are real. You see, human flourishing, the cornerstone of Matt's ideology and that of secular humanism, is totally meaningless. Flourishing by whose metric?
As an example of his point, Andrew argues that by his standard, enabling people who believe that men can be women doesn't lead to human flourishing, as Matt puts it. He then hammers home that Matt has no justification for any of his beliefs, asking why society should lie about a number of biological truths, such as men being unable to be impregnated or to have periods. He asks how secular humanism can possibly increase human flourishing if its core foundation leads to it promoting lifestyles that will only shrink a society, such as homosexuality.
From my perspective, for instance, attempting to lie to people who claim men can be women isn't human flourishing. From Matt's perspective, it is. Why? Why should the collective of humanity lie and say men can get pregnant? Why should they say that men can have periods? Things which are categorically and obviously false. That preserving homosexuality in society is good for human flourishing, even though they are reproductive dead ends. And that Western society and egalitarianism is superior to those evil theist society, even though the Western nations can't even reproduce their own populations, but instead have to replace their population with foreigners from those theist nations that can reproduce.
He then returns the focus to the question of whether a man can become a woman, framing it as an easy question whose answer can be provided by a lighthearted family comedy movie. According to Andrew, secular humanists argue that men can become women, with their justification being that we can simply change the definition of words to suit whatever position is being advocated for.
Let's start with a basic societal question recently asked of the West, who has now embraced a scientific and non-theistic approach to governing. Super basic question every kindergartner knows. If you don't believe me, go watch Kindergarten Cop. The question posed to the Western nation is, can a man be a woman? Right? To the question of if a man can be a woman, they say the answer is yes. And the way we will decree they can be a woman is by simply saying that woman now means male. Problem solved. Thank you, secular humanists. Thank you so much. Nope, not kidding.
This is going to be a very biased thing to bring up here, but it's worth noting that Andrew is far funnier and more charismatic than Matt is. That doesn't mean that his arguments are stronger, but it does make his arguments much easier to sit through.
Andrew then claims that the reason why secular humanists use such brain-dead logic to justify these false positions is because their core metric for improving society is measured by how many people feel good from any given solution. He then rephrases their approach to the issue of gender dysphoria using extremely heated language.
Why, you ask, would people be this over-the-top stupid? Well, it's simple. The good is the good, man. We have to do what's good for human society and human flourishing, and if you don't call these deranged lunatics something they obviously aren't, they might self-terminate, so in order to avoid that, we need to make everybody on planet Earth lie to them. This is human flourishing. Just redefine shit, pretend it's true. How laughably absurd this worldview is.
That particular barb played a big role in what Matt did after Andrew delivered his opening statement. And if you've been paying any attention to what Matt said in his opening statement, then you'll know how hypocritical that is of him. But again, we'll get there when we get there.
Andrew contends that Matt's justification for not believing in God is that there's no convincing proof of his existence, and he flips that standard around on Matt, asking him to prove to Andrew that men can have babies, and that there are any means one can use to determine which gender someone's sexual partner is. He also argues that he, and any rational person, would very much like an answer to the question of why people who believe that they are the opposite gender to the one they were born as aren't being delusional. Andrew then explains how he believes that such positions are total lies cooked up by sexual deviants who mask their degeneracy by labeling acceptance of it as improving human flourishing.
Matt will often say, I remain unconvinced. Well, Matt, I'm also going to use your standard. I need for you to 100% convince me beyond a shadow of a doubt that males can have babies. What's the answer going to be? No, Andrew, you big stupid. Males can't have babies. Men can have babies. Because we just defined man to include females, dummy. Well, Matt, I remain unconvinced. I'd like Matt to convince me that if you are a male and you are having sex with another male, which would not be allowed in my version of a secular humanist worldview, how is it that you're not just basically having sex with a guy with a wig on? I really want to know the answer to that question. Not just me, but all rational people who aren't lunatics also want to know why "it's ma'am" isn't a complete and total crock of garbage. Because I remain unconvinced that it isn't a total lie, and that these people don't just pervert the language to include their own perversions and then add human flourishing at the end.
Next, Andrew turns to Matt himself, personally attacking some of the positions he claims Matt took in a previous debate. One of which is that Matt wouldn't make a law preventing 9-year-olds from having sex with one another. Andrew proposes that under his supposedly authoritarian worldview, he'd create laws which would hold the parents criminally liable for allowing such an act to take place, which in his mind would increase human flourishing, as it would provide incentive for parents not to let their children engage in such activities. Next on the chopping block for his dictatorship is the act of simulating sexual acts in public, which he would criminalize for normalizing indecency, as normalizing indecency wouldn't increase human flourishing in his eyes either. He ends this particular point by asking Matt to prove how he's wrong.
Matt has said he wouldn't make a law stopping 9-year-olds from having sex with each other. Not kidding. Now, I know this is going to sound a little bit totalitarian, but I would in fact create laws that made it a crime for a 9-year-old to have sex with their 9-year-old. I would hold the parents criminally liable for allowing this to happen in my evil authoritarian society, where I don't even let 9-year-olds have sex or the parents go straight to jail for negligence. Now, I think that's better for human flourishing. I think maybe parents would be far less likely to let their 9-year-olds do that if they went to jail. Stupid me. Next, I would in my authoritarian society decree that all simulated sex acts in public were criminal offenses and would make sure that all people went to prison for the crime of indecency, which doesn't assist with human flourishing, and I'd like to know why I'm wrong.
Andrew then pivots to explaining how he views secular humanism as an ideology. According to him, secular humanism can mean whatever somebody wants it to mean, as it doesn't require any grounding principles or axioms to promote whatever somebody needs it to. He once again asks why society needs to permit and defend what he views as horrific beliefs and practices in order to, quote, advance humanity, unquote, and why such things are necessary for humans to flourish. He then asks what exactly is wrong with his ethical system, and how Christian ethics would hinder human flourishing if the end goal for Christians is to reproduce. He points out that such an end goal, which runs totally counter to his understanding of the secular humanist principle, that being that people should just have sex with one another with no eyes towards conceiving a child, is ultimately better for society. As how can human beings flourish if human beings no longer exist?
Secular humanism can basically be whatever the hell you want it to be. It doesn't really need the principle of freedom or the starting axiom of freedom and peace in order to postulate whatever it wants. It's sloganeering. They're slogans. They don't mean anything. Okay, why do 9-year-olds need to be able to have sex in order to advance humanity? Why do we need to lie about a person's sex in order to advance humanity? Why are these things necessary for human flourishing? Why are decency laws bad? Why would Christian ethics stop flourishing when the theist mandate is to reproduce and the secular mandate is let's just all have sex and have fun, bro? That sounds way worse for human flourishing. In fact, I would say not reproducing is the worst possible thing for human flourishing, because if there's no humans, how do you flourish?
Andrew ends his opening statement by laying out what Matt needs to accomplish in this discussion, which are as follows. He needs to convince Andrew with facts and logic that all or most of Andrew's positions are wrong without appealing to God being a fictional entity, as Andrew already accepted that claim at the beginning of his opening statement. He briefly explains that his reason for accepting Matt's premise that God doesn't exist is to be able to demonstrate how stupid secular humanism is, even without needing to appeal to God's existence, and he yields the floor to Matt.
So, I guess, in essence, step 1, I remain unconvinced. Step 2, I need to be convinced so I am no longer unconvinced. And step 3, but God not real though doesn't matter here. I've already granted it to still demonstrate just how stupid this ideology actually is. With that, I'll yield my time, and I'm happy to get into it.
So those were the opening statements of the debate. And to be honest, neither side has done anything too egregious. Both men stepped up to the plate and delivered their positions in a calm, respectful manner. They didn't use pretty language, but there was no yelling, no fighting, and no other underhanded tactics that were used by either party. They just delivered their core arguments in a concise, digestible manner that makes it easy for the average person to follow their thought process. That is how a formal debate like this is supposed to go. Now, for all of the people that have been asleep up to this point in the video, let me summarize Matt and Andrew's positions. Matt's position is that secular humanism is better for a society to follow than Christian ethics would be because secular humanism prioritizes using reason, science, and voluntary collaboration to find the most equitable solution to society's social and economic ills. Andrew's position, on the other hand, is that it ultimately doesn't matter how barbaric his rigid moral compass seems to others, nor does it matter if the God who offered him his rigid moral compass actually exists or not, because Matt's entire worldview lacks basic epistemic justification. As such, any objection that Matt can posit against Christian ethics, Andrew can just dismiss by saying, well, I personally think that my moral compass leads to increased human flourishing. According to Andrew, this means that the question we should be asking is which worldview produces better outcomes for society, to which he argues that Christianity does. No matter who you agree with, or whose arguments sound more persuasive to you, I think we can all agree that the talking points which have been laid out here have the potential to lead us to a fascinating debate about the nature of truth, and what we use to determine what's true. Unfortunately, all of that potential got thrown out the window because of what Matt did immediately after Andrew delivered his opening statement. Now, because the debate proper is over, and I've already given you guys my final thoughts, I'm going to transition from the objective, review-styled response that I've been doing throughout this video, and into a more straightforward rebuttal of Matt's preceding arguments. So, for those of you who were only here for the debate review, now is the time to bounce, because Matt gave me plenty of shit to rake him over the coals for, and I absolutely intend to make the best of those opportunities. With all of that boring nonsense out of the way, let's get into the rage quit.
Hey, James, I just sent you a message.
Yes, I sent you a message over the phone instead of just telling you that message to your face, even though you're standing only a few feet away from me. I are very smart, you see.
Alright, we are going to kick it into an open discussion, so 50 minutes and let's kick it.
No, I don't think so. I'm not going to sit here and dignify the preparation that I went through.
Preparation? What preparation? You admitted in the middle of your opening statement that you had no idea who Andrew Wilson was and made no effort to look him up.
So I don't know Andrew at all. I don't know what version of Christianity he's advocating for. I didn't bother to look him up. We literally just met and said hello as I sat down here. Is his version of Christianity better? I really hope so.
I'm not sure if you know this, Mr. Enlightened Atheist, but researching your opponent is considered part of the preparation for a formal debate like this. That's because not everyone uses the same points to argue for a position, nor does everyone argue the same way. So if you couldn't even be bothered to try and figure out who Andrew Wilson was, I once again must ask, what the fuck kind of preparation are you talking about?
And what people were here for.
You're so indignant.
Keep interrupting me.
I am.
Okay.
You're so indignant.
Would the moderator like to step in so that I can finish what I'm saying?
Please, Matt.
I love how Matt is acting as though Andrew is the one who is being out of line here. I don't know, Matt. considering that you're the one who's trying to ditch this whole debate just because your opponent was a little mean to you, I think that Andrew is perfectly justified in interrupting your moralizing filibuster so that he can make fun of you for that.
How dare someone have an opposing worldview?
I'm not going to sit here and dignify what was supposed to be a debate about Christianity versus secular humanism, which one's better for the world,
Yes.
with someone who clearly showed up with an agenda that has nothing to do with that.
What are you talking about? Andrew's entire argument was that even if you granted secular humanism all of its presuppositions and assumptions, Christian ethics would still be better for a society to follow because it would lead to that society upholding biological truths and reproducing at an increased rate. That all sounds pretty on topic to me.
I just like
Someone who refers to trans people as deranged lunatics who will self-terminate if you dare to question them?
Yeah, this guy is upset with Andrew for calling trans people deluded, suicidal lunatics. You guys remember when I told y'all to keep Matt's outlook on Christianity in mind? This right here is exactly why. Let's go back and listen to how he described Christians.
Our best efforts in this life are, according to the Bible, like filthy rag. Our best attempts at righteousness and justice are portrayed as vile and disgusting when compared to a bumbling God constantly failing to get his creation to love and respect him, while also prescribing the death penalty for nearly everything. Which is better for society? Well, I'd say the one that has human society as its focus and isn't so intent on killing humans for not buying into a specific doctrine. The promises of immortal salvation or eternal damnation are illusory and harmful. So what happens when religions control societies and governments, either legitimate or illegitimate? Well, conflicts with other societies and other governments may not have any reasoned diplomatic solution. You need only look to Gaza. Liberal and moderate Christians provide legitimacy and cover to hide the fundamentalists and to allow them to engage in Christian nationalism. The foundational principles of secular humanism solve conflicts with data, debate, and discussion instead of coercion, conversion, or conquest. There is no secular humanist sect and no denomination of secular humanists that's ever required someone to believe something that is not empirically verifiable, that's ever ordered the death of another person, that's ever ordered or acted to act or destroy property of any person or government, that has ever overthrown a democracy to impose a secular humanist regime, that's ever been connected with terrorist cells and activities, that's ever denied freedom of speech or expression, that's ever called for the deaths of people for criticizing secular humanism or any religious view, that has ever advocated for or inspired suicide bombers or terrorist attacks. Those things are simply not consistent in any way with the core values of secular humanism.
So, it's perfectly fine for Matt to describe God as a bumbling psychopath whose followers are sadistic torturers whose backwards views on sexuality would lead to the protection of pedophiles. However, if Andrew dares to call trans people crazy, that's going too far.
Now that is irony.
Some will try to argue that Matt's reaction to Andrew's barb isn't unjustified because his partner is a transgender woman, and so this issue hits closer to home for Matt, but nope, that's cope. Matt brought up the LGBT in his opening statement, so he can't cry foul when Andrew does the exact same thing in a far more aggressive manner in his opening statement. Either address the argument or don't bring the argument up at all.
How am I wrong, Matt?
That's a good question, Andrew. Unfortunately, Matt isn't mature enough to give you an answer.
Someone who misrepresents a quote from a debate where I said I wouldn't make a law about 9-year-olds having sex being legal with respect to the 9-year-olds, not that I was in any way in favor of it and that I was actually opposed to it, which I addressed during that debate.
So, this is a point that I would normally grant Matt. If somebody is misconstruing an argument that you made in order to make you sound like a monster, then that is bad, and you should call that person out for doing so. The reason why I'm not going to grant Matt this point, however, is because he is in the prime position to refute Andrew's interpretation of his argument. Yet, instead of using this debate to prove that Andrew got his point wrong, Matt is running away with his tail tucked between his legs. My nigga, the floor is yours. Defend yourself if you think that Andrew lied about one of your points. If you cannot be bothered to do that, then I'm just gonna go ahead and assume that you do want 9-year-olds to have sex with each other.
But moreover, this is not remotely an honest interaction on the front of whether or not secular humanism is valuable. Because this, when he presented his position here, has nothing to do with secular humanism.
Oh no, it absolutely does. You're just not intelligent enough to counter any of it.
From the get-go, it's all about me. Matt thinks, Matt thinks, Matt thinks. I'm giving what Matt thinks, what Matt thinks, what Matt thinks, what Matt thinks.
Technically, Matt, Andrew only attacked one of your personal arguments. But that aside, remember when I told you guys to keep in mind Matt's whole diatribe about Mike Johnson's personal beliefs? Yep, this is the reason why. Let's revisit some of what Matt said about Mike in his opening statement.
Mike Johnson's the new Speaker of the House in the United States. He's homophobic as all get out. He's argued to criminalize homosexuality. Moreover, he advocates for gay conversion therapy, which is unscientific and torturous, because he thinks he can help them pray the gay away, and the gay can be eliminated. He's not anti-gay. He just wants them to cease to exist as gay. He thinks there's no right to sodomy. Privacy laws don't protect everything, and he thinks that what sort of sex you have, it should be his to regulate. 2022, he presented what was called the Don't Say Gay bill, outlawing any discussion of gender identity, sexual orientation, or related subjects, which was incredibly problematic because he ignored what the experts have to say about age-appropriate content and how critical it is, especially for kids under 10, which was his target, to have correct language in order to better report on and about sexual abuse. His policy, if it had been implemented, would have made it more traumatic for kids and more difficult for them to out their abusers, and easier for abusers to get away with it. In 2015, he blamed abortions and the breakup of the nuclear family for school shootings. He also says the teaching of evolution is to blame for mass shootings because we've taught a whole generation, a couple generations now, of Americans that there's no right or wrong, that it's about survival of the fittest, and if you evolve from a primordial slime, what is that life of any sacred value? He wants student-led prayer back in school. He's opposed to the separation of religion and government, sometimes called the separation of church and state. He thinks that the founders only wanted to protect the church from the state and didn't want to protect the state from the church.
Yeah, Matt, what exactly does Mike Johnson's personal beliefs have to do with this debate? Last I checked, you were supposed to be critiquing Christian ethics, not one particular Christian's interpretation of Christian ethics. Hypocrisy, thy name is Matt Dillahunty.
I came in with the Secular Humanist Manifesto. I came in with positions that aren't that aren't merely my position.
Oh.
Okay, it doesn't matter if multiple people hold the exact same position that you do. At the end of the day, you are still a proponent of secular humanism, and Andrew did exactly what you were asking him to, which was offer a rebuttal to your ideology. If you're going to chicken out of this debate like a little bitch, could you at the very least come up with smarter reasons for doing so than this?
Well, as long as multiple people hold the position, it
This
makes it
guy's
valid.
not serious and I'm leaving. James, if you want a refund, you
Well,
let me know.
good day, sir.
And there you have it. That right there was the moment when Matt became a laughingstock while Andrew became a rising star on the debate sphere. Hey, and it only took about 20 minutes. Now, I could give my final thoughts on this whole train wreck right here, but there are still a couple things Matt said while he was leaving that are worthy of mockery. So let's get those things out of the way first.
As Matt was taking off the body mic that was taped to him, the host of the debate, James Kunz, who also happens to be the founder and leader of the Modern Day Debates organization, desperately tried to get Matt to stay by appealing to basic human decency. However, Matt turned down his offer by giving the following awful excuse.
Nope. Nope. No, I'm not going to dignify a debate with someone who walked in to trash talk people and be smug and all of the things that he's being right now.
Yeah, Matt, Andrew is the one fumbling the ball here, and not you, the person who's, running away from the debate. I also love that Matt is doubling down on his reasoning for quitting the debate. He is unironically leaving because Andrew was a little mean to him. That is fucking rich coming from Matt Dillahunty, who is one of the most rude, smug, and condescending debaters on the left. Like, his smugness is one of his defining characteristics, yet he's seriously going to run away from this debate because his opponent was being smug? Go fuck yourself, you piece of shit.
He's already said he will cover my expenses. You don't have anything to worry about. This debate is over. Goodbye,
Goodbye.
jackass.
I would rip into Matt for calling Andrew a jackass for no reason here, but Andrew already provided a fantastic rebuttal to that himself, so I'll just let him take it from here.
Did you call me a jackass, Matt? Well, you and your husband have a good day, Matt. Have a wonderful day, Matt.
Man, you cannot write drama this good. The funny part is, Matt tried to chastise Andrew for dragging his partner into this, though you can barely hear him because of how far away from the microphone he is.
Yeah. No, that was fun.
Yeah, Matt, you lose the right to complain about something like that when you're more than fine with calling an entire demographic of religious people insane torturers whose beliefs protect pedophiles just because one member of that religious demographic has views you don't like. Matt's fanboys tried to defend this rage quit by arguing that Andrew attacked Matt's partner for no reason, but again, that isn't true. Andrew only threw out the barb towards Matt's partner after Matt called him a jackass. Now, let's see how Andrew responds to this.
No, that was fine. I mean, if you're going to take a parting shot, I will too, Matt. Yeah.
Not bad, not bad. Matt, what's your counter to that? Ooh, I'm sorry, Matt. You struck out. Turns out that "'cause I said so" is not a valid defense. You're gonna have to try again. Oh wait, you can't, because you ran away like a bitch. That is very, very sad. Now, the reason why I decided to take a look at this debate is because it offers us an excellent lesson in integrity. Put aside what you think about the persuasiveness of each person's opening statement, and also put aside what you think about Andrew's demeanor. What Matt Dillahunty did here was disrespectful and cowardly. Remember, this wasn't a casual debate hosted over Discord where the arguers could call in from home and the viewers could watch from home. This was a formal debate held at a physical location that people, including Andrew Wilson himself, had to spend time, money, and energy to attend. For Matt to ditch this debate entirely because his opponent was making arguments he didn't like in a way that he felt was distasteful essentially makes him a scam artist. Sure, he may not have signed a contractual agreement to participate in this debate, but the fact remains that people paid money to watch him debate Andrew Wilson about their competing ideologies, which he agreed to do by virtue of him being at this event and taking on a starring role. So for him to renege on his deal because his fifis got hurt makes him, in principle, a scammer. You wanna know what the most infuriating part of all of this is, though? Matt himself has criticized people who rage quit debates for petty reasons.
Yeah, in another good video breaking down the debate that was made by a Catholic political commentator and debater named Trent Horn, Trent brought up an instance where a Christian apologist hung up on Matt during a debate they were having because said apologist didn't like where the debate was going. In this situation, as soon as his opponent left, Matt expressed disbelief that somebody would rage quit a debate just because they didn't like how aggressively Matt was questioning the veracity of their claims.
If you're just going to keep dismissing the evidence, then we're done.
Yes, we are. We are. And you know whose fault it is? The God that you believe in, because the God that you believe in is too stupid to understand that when he presents something in a way where it's indistinguishable from other things that are false, that's the end of the conversation. I didn't make up the rules about what counts as evidence. Oh, did he just leave?
No, I don't. I mean, he's definitely not here, but I don't know if
I heard him say we're done.
I don't know if it was. I'd be surprised if it was a rage.
I'm pretty sure he just quit because I'm not going to accept the stories from his book while he's not giving me any reason why he's rejecting the stories from other people's books.
Now, the guy did come back into the debate and apologize to Matt for his behavior, but that didn't matter. Matt's opinion on the guy soured, and in his follow-up review of the debate, Matt excoriated him for leaving the debate just because his feelings got hurt.
He came back, he apologized, he let people know that it was because he was frustrated that I had interrupted him, but that was the format that we had agreed to before the debate. So he can't run off and say, oh, Matt was mean to me, Matt interrupted me, Matt talked over me, and that's just totally, not the sort of thing we should be doing in a debate. That's the format that he agreed to. And instead of making use of the rules and talking to the moderator, he decided, in a little pissy fit of frustration, to hang up and go away.
You know what, Matt? I agree. It is bad for somebody to rage quit a debate just because they didn't like the tactics that their opponent was using, even though, as a seasoned debater, they should already be well aware that this is just how debates go, and they had already agreed to have a debate like this. Now, since you committed pretty much the exact same mistake, I'm sure that we're not gonna see you try to rationalize your behavior anytime soon. Lord, I really need to stop talking sometimes. So yeah, despite Matt quitting his debate with Andrew for unjustifiable reasons, and despite Matt raking other people over the coals for behaving in this exact same manner, he and his husband nevertheless saw fit to try and ad hoc their way out of accepting responsibility for his actions. I believe we have a word that describes this sort of person.
You're a douchebag. 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 You're a douchebag. Douchebag.
For anybody who's wondering, no, I'm not going to be responding to Matt's video, nor to whatever tweets he and his husband posted after this incident took place. After all, if Matt can't respect the time and money that people at this debate spent to watch it in person, then I'm not gonna do him the courtesy of listening to whatever bogus rationalizations he cooked up to defend himself. So that was the saga of Matt Dillahunty's pathetic rage quit. How did things end up like this, you ask? Well, I have a theory. Matt Dillahunty is a bully. Whether you agree with his worldview or not, and whether or not you agree with the way he argues for his worldview, the fact remains that Matt loves treating people like garbage. Paradoxically, however, he is also incredibly thin-skinned. This means that whenever somebody like Andrew Wilson, who not only has decent counters to Matt's arguments, but can also match Matt's vitriolic demeanor, comes along, Matt panics and calls the whole debate off because he can't actually handle it when somebody treats him in the exact same way that he treats others. It also didn't help that Matt's position was complete and utter nonsense, and that he didn't actually have an answer to any of the questions that Andrew asked him. So, what lesson can we viewers glean from all of this?
Oh, a bird in the hoof always looks twice before crossing the street.
Well said, Twilight Sparkle. I'm Alex the Critic, and I'll see you guys next time.